Hello everyone, and welcome back to your home at Easy English Spark, where we ignite your English listening and speaking skills. Today, we'll step into a world of wonder, exploring Chapter 1, The Mysterious Encounter, Unveiling. Chapter 2, Beauty and Mystery, and journeying onward to discover brilliance, heart, and hope. So grab your headphones, tune your ears, and warm up your voice, because your most confident, fluent self is just one chapter away. Let's spark your English. Adventure. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Encounter. I still clearly remember the first day I saw her, though it feels as though countless years have passed since that moment. It happened during one of my trips to a historic, forgotten town nestled quietly beside the gentle currents of the Danube River. The town itself was charmingly aged, filled with winding cobblestone streets and buildings whose ancient walls whispered secrets to those who listened carefully. It was here, amidst this atmosphere of faded elegance and mystery, that Elena first appeared in my life. I had wandered aimlessly into a small cafe, seeking shelter from the persistent drizzle of late autumn rain. Inside, the dim lights cast delicate shadows over old paintings that lined the walls. The air was thick with the comforting aroma of freshly ground coffee mingled with the faint scent of antique wood and old books. I ordered my usual espresso and sat near a fogged-up window, my gaze drifting out toward the misty streets. That was the precise moment when Elena walked through the cafe's door. Her entry was so quiet and graceful that no one else seemed to notice her arrival. It was as if she had simply materialized from the cold, rainy twilight outside. I found myself instantly captivated by her presence. She wore a long, dark coat that elegantly framed her slender figure, and a silk scarf around her neck added a hint of delicate sophistication. Her black hair, long and glossy, cascaded gently over her shoulders, creating a stunning contrast with her porcelain-white skin. She chose a seat not far from mine, quietly settling down and placing her elegant hands on the table before her. I couldn't help but notice that her movements were extraordinarily graceful, as though every action was thoughtfully choreographed. Curious, yet hesitant, I glanced discreetly toward her, feeling strangely drawn to this mysterious stranger. As if sensing my gaze, Elena slowly turned her head, her deep, dark eyes meeting mine directly. Her eyes were larger than any I had ever seen, and as they locked onto mine, a strange yet mesmerizing sensation coursed through me, a feeling I could neither describe nor fully understand. Those eyes held a depth that hinted at secrets too, profound for words, and yet there was warmth within them, something inviting amidst their enigmatic darkness. Surprisingly, Elena smiled softly, breaking the quiet tension that had formed between us. Encouraged by her gentle expression, I gathered the courage to speak. "It's quite a dreary day, isn't it?" I remarked softly, trying to sound casual despite the rapid beating of my heart. She continued smiling warmly. "Perhaps, but even the dreariest days can lead us to unexpected places and unexpected encounters," she responded. Her voice was melodic, soft, yet confident, carrying with it an accent I couldn't quite place, which only deepened my curiosity about her origins. From that moment onward, our conversation flowed effortlessly, as if we had known each other for years rather than mere minutes. Elena spoke eloquently about art, history, philosophy, and the mysteries hidden within this ancient town. I soon discovered she possessed remarkable intelligence and wisdom far beyond her years. She told me vaguely about her aristocratic heritage, but skillfully avoided revealing her family name. Her secrecy intrigued me further, and though curious, I chose not to press her too much. Hours passed unnoticed as the rain outside intensified, painting the cafe windows with streams of silver droplets. When we finally noticed how late it had grown, Elena gracefully rose from her seat, slipping her coat back on and preparing to leave. "Will I see you again?" I asked cautiously, suddenly fearful of losing the connection we had so swiftly formed. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes once more filled with that mysterious intensity that had first captured me. "Perhaps sooner than you expect," she whispered softly, a delicate smile touching her lips. And with those cryptic words lingering in the air, she quietly exited the cafe, leaving me alone, mesmerized by our encounter, and already longing for our next meeting. Little did I realize then, on that rainy autumn evening beside the Danube, just how profoundly Elena's mysterious entrance into my life would alter my fate. Chapter 2: Beauty and Mystery. From the very first day Elena entered my life, I found myself increasingly fascinated, even captivated by her unique and extraordinary beauty. Yet, it was not beauty in the conventional sense, not something you'd typically notice in magazines or films. It was far deeper, far stranger, and infinitely more captivating. Her presence seemed to permeate every moment I spent awake, filling my thoughts both day and night. Elena's physical appearance was certainly striking. Indeed, one could hardly ignore her presence. She stood taller than most women I'd ever known, and her figure, slender and almost delicate in appearance, radiated a quiet elegance that often made people pause and watch as she passed by. Her steps were soundless, graceful, and precise. When she entered a room, the only indication of her arrival was often the sudden hush that descended upon everyone present. Her movements possessed an aristocratic dignity, yet also a mysterious subtlety that constantly intrigued me. Her hair was impossibly black, as if spun from the shadows of midnight itself, cascading down her back in gentle waves. When touched by sunlight, it shone softly, revealing an unexpected warmth hidden beneath its darkness. Many times as we sat quietly together, I found myself gazing at her hair, marveling at how such perfect darkness could hold so much light within it. Yet, her hair, enchanting as it was, paled in comparison to the enigma of her face. Elena's skin was astonishingly pale, smooth and flawless, with a porcelain texture that made her seem fragile and almost otherworldly. Under candlelight, her skin had a faint luminescence, casting an ethereal glow around her that only deepened the mystery she embodied. But of all her features, it was her eyes that truly haunted me. They were larger than any eyes I'd ever seen, deep, dark pools that drew me inexorably in each time our gazes met. They were the color of polished obsidian, set beneath perfectly arched black brows and fringed with impossibly long lashes that accentuated their extraordinary beauty. When she was calm, her eyes were serene, almost soothing. Yet when she became animated, passionate about something, those same eyes would widen, resembling the innocent yet profound gaze of a deer caught in the moonlight. Bright, fearful, and astonishingly alive. Often, late into the night, I would lie awake pondering those eyes. There was a quality hidden within them, an emotion, a secret, that I felt compelled to understand. Yet the harder I tried to decipher their meaning, the more elusive that meaning became. Was it sadness? Was it a distant memory that haunted her? Or was it perhaps a mysterious truth she could never reveal? Every time I believed I'd come close to solving the riddle, the answer would vanish as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me restless and profoundly disturbed. Beyond her physical allure, Elena was surrounded by an inexplicable aura of mystery. Though she spoke often about philosophy, literature, and history, she remained curiously evasive about her own past. Whenever I asked about her family or her background, she offered only brief, enigmatic answers that never satisfied my curiosity. Once she mentioned coming from a lineage of aristocrats who lived quietly, hidden away from the prying eyes of the world. Yet, when pressed further, she deftly diverted the conversation, leaving me with more questions than answers. Elena's personality was as complex and intriguing as her physical appearance. She was quiet yet possessed an intensity that startled me on several occasions. Her voice, always soft and calm, carried remarkable power, a quiet authority that immediately commanded respect from everyone who heard her speak. She rarely showed anger or irritation. Instead, she exuded a sense of control and confidence so strong that even I, who knew her intimately, found it unsettling at times. On several occasions, I observed how others reacted to her presence. Elena seemed to evoke both admiration and unease among strangers. Friends were drawn to her, fascinated by her charm and intelligence, yet strangely hesitant, as if sensing something powerful and unknown beneath the surface. I, too, sometimes felt uneasy in her presence, though the feeling quickly turned into awe, then fascination, and finally into something far deeper, a powerful emotion I could only name as love. Despite her outward composure, Elena carried within her a determination so intense it often made me uneasy. Her ambition showed itself clearly in her academic pursuits. She mastered languages, philosophy, and literature effortlessly, never making mistakes. Her mind was sharp, precise, and incisive. In discussions or debates, she could effortlessly dismantle arguments, presenting her own positions with flawless logic and insight. Even professors respected, and sometimes feared, her intellectual brilliance. Still, I sensed Elena's inner determination was about far more than mere intellectual achievement. There was something deeper driving her, something mysterious, and perhaps even troubling. Once, during an evening conversation by the fireplace, she had briefly mentioned the importance of fighting against destiny, of refusing to yield to fate. Her voice had grown intense, almost fierce, as she described life as a relentless battle that one must never surrender. I asked her what she meant, but she simply smiled quietly and shook her head, refusing to elaborate further. These mysteries about Elena only deepened the bonds between us. As weeks turned into months, I felt myself becoming not only enchanted, but increasingly dependent on her presence. The unknown depths of her character challenged me intellectually and emotionally, and I longed desperately to understand her completely. Yet, part of me knew instinctively that some aspects of Elena were beyond my reach, forever concealed beneath her captivating exterior. One particular evening, as twilight deepened into night, we sat quietly beside an open window overlooking the river, the distant lights of the ancient town shimmering gently on the water. Elena, her expression more thoughtful than usual, softly whispered a phrase that chilled me with its intensity. Sometimes I fear my beauty will become my curse. I immediately asked what she meant, alarmed by the sadness in her voice. But, again, Elena fell silent, turning her eyes to the darkness outside, lost in thought. I felt a strange fear stirring within me, a premonition that perhaps Elena knew something that I did not, something ominous and profound. I wanted desperately to reassure her, to promise that I would always be there, to protect her from whatever shadows haunted her. But before I could say anything, she turned back to me, her gentle smile returning. "It's nothing," she whispered softly, touching my hand gently. "Just a foolish thought." In that quiet moment, staring once again into those mesmerizing dark eyes, I realized that Elena's beauty and mystery were inseparable. Each fed off the other, intensifying the spell she had woven around me, a spell from which I now understood clearly I would never be able to break free. Chapter 3. A Brilliant Mind. From the very moment I met Elena, it became strikingly clear that her gifts extended far beyond her haunting beauty and enigmatic presence. Beneath those obsidian eyes lay an intellect so keen and multifaceted that anyone fortunate enough to witness it would immediately recognize they stood in the presence of something extraordinary. Over the weeks that followed our first chance meeting, I came to understand that Elena's brilliance was not merely a tool she wielded in academic pursuits, but an integral part of her identity, intimate, irresistible, and at times unsettling. Mastery of languages. Elena spoke 5 languages fluently: German, English, French, Latin, and ancient Greek, and she was currently dabbling in a 6th, Sanskrit. I learned this one afternoon when, out of sheer curiosity, I asked her to translate an old Latin inscription I had discovered on a weathered gravestone near the town square. Within moments, she not only provided an exact word-for-word translation, but also offered insights into idiomatic expressions and the broader cultural context in which the text was originally inscribed. Her pronunciation was flawless, each syllable rolling off her tongue with a musical precision that hinted at a lifelong devotion to the art of oratory, philosophical depth. Elena often invited me into rich, expansive discussions about the great philosophers, Plato, Kant, Nietzsche, and she never failed to surprise me with her depth of understanding. One evening, lantern light flickering across her face, she launched into a detailed analysis of Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, explaining how it diverged from modern interpretations of happiness and how it aligned more closely with the notion of flourishing through virtue. She spoke with such clarity and passion that I sat utterly spellbound, realizing how shallow my own understanding had been until that moment. Scientific curiosity. Yet Elena's intellect was not confined to the humanities. She possessed an almost obsessive curiosity for the sciences. I first noticed this when I accompanied her to the modest natural history museum in our town. As we passed the display on mineralogy, she paused in front of a specimen of rose quartz, studying its crystalline structure for an unreasonably long time. When I asked why she seemed so absorbed, she explained with graphic detail the process of crystal lattice formation, its molecular geometry, and even speculated on how trace elements within the quartz could produce variations in hue. Later, she pulled from her coat pocket a small hand-drawn diagram illustrating the growth pattern of quartz under differing pressure conditions. She had sketched it during her train journey earlier that day, she confided, to see if my theory holds. Mathematical precision. Numbers and equations for Elena were like the notes of a grand symphony, each element playing a precise part in a larger, harmonious whole. One afternoon, as I struggled with a complex differential calculus problem for my own studies, she sat beside me and guided me through the solution step by step. She never simply gave me answers. Instead, she asked probing questions that led me to correct reasoning and ultimately to the correct result. Watching her work was like observing a master artisan, her graceful hand moving across the page, her mind calculating possibilities at dizzying speed, her pen pausing only to add notes in the margin that often contained insights more profound than the solutions themselves. Artistic sensibility. Elena's brilliance extended even into artistic realms. She played the piano beautifully, her fingers dancing over the keys with effortless poise. On one rainy afternoon, she invited me into her modest parlor and performed an intricate Chopin nocturne. As the final notes faded into the hush of the room, she turned to me and said, almost apologetically, "I'm still working on the transitions in the second movement." In that moment, I realized that even her musical achievements were tinged with the exacting self-critique that defined her intellect, a refusal to accept anything less than perfection. Teaching with grace. It was during study sessions that I witnessed Elena's most remarkable gift, her ability to teach. Whenever I grew frustrated or burdened by the weight of complex theories, Elena would patiently break concepts down into simple, elegant metaphors. She likened the flow of electrical current to water coursing through a river, the expansion of the universe to a rising balloon that stretches the fabric of space, and the intricacies of human psychology to the interplay of light and shadow in a painting. Her explanations never felt condescending, but rather empowering. Each explanation ignited in me a fresh curiosity and the confidence to tackle challenges I had once deemed insurmountable. A mind unbound, yet as luminous as Elena's intellect was, it carried with it a quiet, poignant melancholy. On more than one occasion, I caught her staring out of the window late at night, her expression distant, as though she were lost in thoughts too vast for words. When I gently inquired what burdened her mind, she would simply smile and say, "I think too much." I came to understand that a mind as brilliant as hers could unravel the beauty of the universe and at times be wounded by its mysteries. Her determination to know and to understand seemed to burn within her like a flame, but I suspected it also left her more vulnerable to the sorrows and uncertainties that knowledge can bring. The invisible bond. In truth, it was Elena's intellect that first drew me to her, weaving an invisible bond between us that went far deeper than infatuation with her appearance. She challenged me to think more critically, to embrace complexity, and to never settle for easy answers. Under her tutelage, I felt myself growing, not only in knowledge, but in wisdom and empathy. With every new idea she introduced me to, I felt my world expanding, my spirit awakening to possibilities I had never dared imagine. As Chapter 3 draws to a close, I can say with certainty that no meeting, no conversation, and no discovery ever felt as profound as those first months spent in Elena's company. Her brilliant mind illuminated the darkest corners of my own understanding, and it is her light, both welcoming and enigmatic, that continues to guide me forward, even as shadows of uncertainty begin to gather on the horizon. Chapter 4. Illness and Loss. In the weeks that followed our blissful study sessions and shared discoveries, Elena began to change in ways I could neither comprehend nor ignore. At first, the signs were subtle, a slight pallor to her cheeks, a quiet tremor in her hands as she turned the pages of her beloved books, an uncharacteristic fatigue that tugged at the corners of her dark eyes. I attributed it to the long hours she devoted to mastering new languages and complex theories. Yet, as days turned into nights and back again, it became clear that something far more serious was at work. It was a crisp morning in late October when I first noticed Elena's condition had worsened. We sat together in the oak-paneled study, the morning light filtering through heavy drapes, illuminating the tiny motes of dust that drifted lazily in the air. Elena was attempting to translate an intricate ancient Greek poem, but her usual confident fluency faltered, She paused mid-sentence, her shoulders slumping, and a look of distress passed across her face. "Elena?" I asked, leaning forward. "Are you well?" She forced a gentle smile and offered me a cup of tea, her fingers trembling slightly as she poured the steaming liquid. I accepted gratefully and watched as she lifted the cup to her lips. But she did not drink. Instead, she closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and set the cup down with unsteady grace. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice held an echo of strain. "Just a momentary lightheadedness. It will pass." I wanted to press her further, to insist she rest, but she dismissed my concerns with a faint laugh, the kind that carried both warmth and a quiet insistence on self-reliance. "You have your studies to complete, James," she said softly. "We will resume soon." I nodded, though my heart ached at the effort it cost her to speak. Still, I trusted her, believed that she would not allow anything to jeopardize the life she so fiercely protected and nurtured. How could I have known then that behind her determined smile lay a sickness slowly, inexorably stealing her vitality? Over the next several days, Elena's condition grew more alarming. She lost weight at an astonishing pace. The elegant curves of her slender form grew painfully gaunt, her once lustrous hair seeming to dull in the morning light. The pale glow of her skin took on a translucent quality, as if her very blood supply was ebbing away. I found her one afternoon, collapsed against the cold stone wall of the manor courtyard, her silk scarf damp with sweat. "Elena!" I cried, rushing to her side. "You're burning up!" She looked up at me with those vast, sorrowful eyes, and for the first time I saw the fear that lived there. She tried to speak but only managed a faint shake of the head. I scooped her into my arms and carried her to her chambers, my mind filled with dread at the thought of losing her. I summoned the local physician, an elderly man with kind gray eyes, who arrived at the manor by lantern light. He examined Elena with grave attentiveness, his practiced fingers checking her pulse, his stethoscope pressed gently against her quivering body. After a tense hour, he finally spoke. "Her condition is serious," he said in a low voice, turning to me. "There is a wasting illness at work. Perhaps a rare form of consumption that attacks the lungs and blood. I can stabilize her, provide palliative remedies, but I fear a full recovery may be impossible." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "No," I whispered fiercely. "There must be something more we can do." The physician shook his head. "I can offer tonics, rest, and nourishment. Beyond that, we may only ease her suffering." Determined to help Elena fight with every ounce of strength she had shown in her studies, I transformed our study chamber into a small infirmary. I brought her nourishing broths, herbal infusions, and the finest remedies the town's apothecary could provide. Each morning, I sat vigil beside her bed, reading to her from her favorite poets, gently brushing away the strands of black hair that clung to her fevered brow. She would listen, her breathing ragged, her hand gripping mine with surprising force, as if drawing strength from the familiar cadence of my voice. Despite my efforts, Elena's illness advanced relentlessly. There were nights when her cough sounded like the brittle crack of old wood tearing through the silence of the manor corridors. I would stay beside her, my heart aching in each beat, watching as her chest rose and fell with the effort of every breath. I pressed my ear against her back and heard the rattling tremors that spoke of failing lungs. Each time she coughed, a small dark spot appeared on the crisp white sheets, an indelible mark of the life slipping away. Yet in her moments of lucidity, Elena remained as resolute as ever. She would open her eyes, lift her head, and speak with calm determination. "I will not surrender, James. I refuse to yield to this." In her words, I heard not only a promise to fight, but an acknowledgement of the love and connection that bound us. It was as if her courage served as a fragile bridge between our two hearts, spanning the growing chasm of her illness and my despair. One evening, as a full moon cast pale light through the tall windows, Elena reached out for my hand. Her grip was feeble, but her dark eyes burned with unwavering intensity. "Promise me," she whispered, her voice scarcely audible. "Promise me you will not grieve me too deeply, for my love for you is my greatest joy." Tears stung my eyes as I clasped her hand tightly. "I promise," I choked, though I knew the vow was a hollow comfort to both of us. She smiled, a ghost of the radiant smile I had first fallen in love with, and closed her eyes, drifting into a restless sleep. I remained at her side until dawn, unwilling to trust that she would still hang on when morning arrived. On the morning of October 28th, as the first blush of sunrise crept across the sky, Elena's breathing grew slower, more labored. The final convulsions of her cough gave way to an agonizing stillness. I watched, helpless and broken, as her chest stilled, and her fingers, once so warm in mine, went cold. The black hair that I had so admired lay like a dark halo around her ivory face, and her vast eyes, which had once held infinite mysteries, now stared unseeing into eternity. I closed her eyelids, smoothing the lashes with trembling fingers. The room felt impossibly silent, every heartbeat in my own chest echoing like a funeral drum. I fell to my knees beside her bed, my soul seared by a grief so profound that words failed me. Only the soft rustle of the drapes in the morning breeze bore witness to the final heartbreaking truth. Elena was gone. In the days that followed, I wandered the ancient town in a daze, unable to claim even a single memory without tears. The cafe where we first met felt hollow and cold. The cobblestone streets, once charming, now seemed jagged and hostile. My studies faltered, my appetite vanished, and each breath felt like a betrayal, a reminder that she was no longer by my side. Word of her passing spread quietly through the town, and a small gathering of her few remaining acquaintances came to pay their respects. They spoke of her brilliance, her kindness, her rare and haunting beauty, but every word felt like a dagger, cutting deeper into my already shattered heart. One afternoon I returned to the manor and ascended the spiral staircase to Elena's chambers. The door stood ajar, and within, the morning light still caught the dust motes dancing above her empty bed. Her books lay undisturbed on her writing desk. Her favorite pens rested in their inkwell as she had left them. I sank onto her chaise longue, overcome by the silence she had once filled. It was there, amid the echoes of her life, that I felt the full weight of my loss, an emptiness so vast that it threatened to swallow me whole. I realized then that nothing would ever be the same. Elena's illness had stolen far more than her life. It had stripped away the future we had planned, the shared laughter, the late-night conversations, the dreams we had spun together. I was left alone, a man adrift in a world that no longer made sense. My only consolation, the memory of her brilliant mind and the intensity of her love. As Chapter 4 closes, I sit here in the failing light of autumn, my heart heavy with sorrow and longing. Elena's absence hangs in the air like a final, unspoken question, one I will carry with me for the rest of my days. Yet, even in this darkness, her last words echo in my mind. Promise me you will not grieve me too deeply. And so, I vow to honor her memory, to carry forward the spark of her intellect and the depth of her courage, even as I navigate a world forever altered by illness and loss. Chapter 5: Isolation and Sorrow. After Elena's death, I found myself a stranger in every familiar place. The ancient town by the Danube, with its narrow lanes and weathered facades, had become a gallery of painful memories, each corner a monument to moments I would never reclaim. Driven by a desperation I could barely comprehend, I sold our cottage there and used the proceeds to purchase a remote estate in the Scottish Highlands. I told myself I needed solitude to mourn, to gather the shards of my broken heart before attempting to rebuild anything resembling a life. The journey north. I set out at dawn, the carriage bumping over dark country roads as mist clung to the heather like specters of regret. With each mile that passed beneath the wheels, I felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that I was moving away from reminders of Elena, terror at the unknown loneliness waiting for me in that desolate land. When I finally arrived at the estate, the late autumn light was fading, and the manor's silhouette loomed against storm-gray clouds. High, narrow windows stared blankly like dark, unblinking eyes, and huge stone buttresses framed the weathered door. I stepped onto its threshold and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold wind. A dreary refuge. Inside, the manor was cavernous and dim. The entrance hall stretched before me in shadow, lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose painted gazes seemed to judge my intrusion. I crossed the threshold, dropping my suitcase on the dusty floor. The fireplace lay cold and empty, the hearth littered with old ashes, and the air itself carried the scent of mothballs and damp stone. The silence was profound. Every footstep echoed like a forlorn plea. I wandered through the maze of corridors, noting how the high ceilings swallowed sound, and how each room felt like an echo chamber for my sorrow. In the great dining hall, a long oak table stood under a crystal chandelier coated in grime. I ran my fingers along the carved surface, imagining Elena's gentle laughter filling the air here. But the laughter never came. Only my own breath, returned in hollow repetition, futile attempts at cheer. Determined to bring color into this bleak fortress, I hired local artisans to hang rich tapestries and install heavy draperies in jewel tones of crimson and gold. Turkish carpets, hand-woven, with intricate patterns, now covered the cold flagstones, and I imported silk cushions for the chairs. Yet, whenever I entered a newly decorated room, I felt nothing but an absurd dissonance. Vibrant fabrics mocking my grief, bright colors that only accentuated the darkness within me. I ordered fresh flowers weekly, peonies, roses, lilies, hoping their fragrances might stir a happier mood. For a few hours after their arrival, I would sit in the drawing room, inhaling their heady scents, remembering how Elena once paused to admire blooms with childlike wonder. But as the petals wilted and the room returned to stillness, the ache would resurface with renewed force, and the flowers themselves seemed to mock my helpless attempts at comfort. Descent into solitude. Hours turned into days, and days bled into nights without distinction. I rarely ventured beyond the estate's grounds, for the moorlands beyond were vast and unwelcoming, peat bogs that swallowed the horizon, and gusts of wind that pierced even the thickest coat. The few villagers brave enough to offer their sympathy were met with polite, distant smiles. I welcomed their distance, for I had no desire for conversation or companionship. Their pity felt like salt in an open wound. My only companion during those endless hours was a bottle of whiskey. What began as a single nightly dram soon grew into a ritual of numbing self-medication. I would sit by the roaring hearth, once lit by my own trembling hand, and pour measure after measure into my glass. The amber liquid burned as it went down, but the warmth it left behind was fleeting. After the fire burned low, I would stumble back to my bedchamber, half-conscious, haunted by nightmares of Elena calling out to me from the shadows. The hollow comfort of drink. At first, the whiskey took the edge off the grief, dulling the sharp pain that throbbed in my chest. I would raise my glass and whisper to the memory of her smile, hoping to summon a fleeting sense of comfort. But the consolations of alcohol were transient. With the dawn's first light, hangovers clawed at me with new guilt and shame. Each morning I vowed to stop, swore I would pour the rest of the bottle down the drain, yet each night the lure of oblivion proved stronger than my resolve. The manor's once stately rooms began to degrade under my neglect. Dust collected on polished surfaces, candles burned low and left wax strips in their holders, and the vibrant tapestries sagged with moisture. My reflection in the tall glass panes grew gaunter with each passing week, hollow-eyed, unshaven, and hollow-cheeked. I barely recognized the man who stared back at me. Letters unsent. In the solitude of my study, I sometimes took pen to paper, pouring out letters I never intended to send. I wrote to Elena, long rambling pages of apology, confession, and longing. I told her how I missed her voice, the way her fingers felt intertwined with mine, the way her laughter could light an entire room. I wrote of my regret for not saving her, for not seeing the depth of her suffering sooner. But when the ink dried, I folded the letters carefully and placed them in a drawer I never opened again. They offered no relief. They only reminded me of all I had lost, echoes and regrets. The nights were the worst. When sleep finally found me, often only after 3 or 4 bottles, the manor seemed to come alive with whisperings. I would awaken in the black hours to the creaking of floorboards as though someone wandered the corridors in search of something lost. Once, I heard a soft, distant laughter, fragile and heartbreaking, like a memory trying to break through the walls of my despair. I leapt from my bed, heart pounding, only to find empty halls and closed doors. The laughter never returned, but its echo haunted me for weeks. In those silent moments, I confronted the stark truth of my situation. I was trapped in a gilded cage, of my own making, surrounded by every conceivable comfort yet utterly bereft of solace. Elena's absence was a wound that no luxury could heal and no drink could soothe. Loneliness, I realized with bitter clarity, was not simply the absence of company. It was the suffocating presence of a soul wrenchingly aware of all it had lost, a flicker of resolve. One morning, after a night of particularly vivid nightmares, I awoke to faint sunlight filtering through the curtains. The manor was as silent as ever, but in that quiet, I sensed something new, a flicker of resolve that had lain dormant beneath my sorrow. As I sat up in bed, my head throbbing with the remnants of whiskey, I made a vow to myself. I would not allow this place of sorrow to become my prison forever. I would find a way to honor Elena's memory, to take the brilliance she had so generously shared with me and carry it forward into the world. I would confront the darkness of my isolation, not by hiding from it, but by walking through it. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, for the first time since her passing, I felt the faint stirrings of purpose stir in my chest. As Chapter 5 draws to a close, the Scottish manor stands quiet around me, its stones steeped in history and loss. The tapestries still hang, the bottles still line the shelves, and the wind still howls through the empty corridors. Yet, within the echoing halls of my own heart, I can sense a small shift, a determination to emerge from this isolating sorrow and face whatever awaits beyond these walls. Elena's absence remains an unhealed ache, but in honoring her memory, I may yet find the strength to carry on. Chapter 6 A New Beginning. After weeks of battling my grief and succumbing to despair in the lonely halls of the Highland Manor, an unexpected opportunity presented itself, a chance to step beyond my sorrow and attempt a new life. One mist-shrouded morning, a letter arrived from my dear friend Lord Sinclair, whom I had known during happier days in the old town by the Danube. Seeing the hollow state I was in, he extended a warm invitation. Visit his family estate in the rolling countryside of Cotswolds. He believed a change of scenery and companionship might stir my spirits. a reluctant departure. I packed a single valise, taking only the essentials: Elena's favorite books, a vial of her perfume, and a worn photograph of us at the Riverside Cafe. As I locked the manor door behind me for what felt like the first time in ages, I hesitated. The cold stone walls had been both my refuge and my prison. Yet recalling Elena's final plea, that I not grieve too deeply, I forced myself onward, determined to honor her memory by seeking life once more. Arrival at Heatherwood Hall. Heatherwood. Hall rose gently from the rolling green hills, its honey-colored stone warmed by early spring sunlight. Gardens stretched in neat beds of daffodils and hyacinths, and a canopy of ancient oaks framed the gravel drive. As I stepped down from the carriage, the fresh country air filled my lungs, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something beyond sorrow, curiosity. Lord Sinclair greeted me at the door, his broad smile and hearty handshake reminding me of camaraderie I had sorely missed. "James, you look as though you've carried winter in your bones," he said kindly. "Come, meet my sister Eleanor. I believe you will find in her a gentle spirit, and perhaps a light in which to rediscover joy." Meeting Eleanor. He led me through a sunlit drawing room to a smaller chamber at the back of the house. There, standing by a vase of freshly cut tulips, was Eleanor Sinclair. She was striking in her own right, tall with warm chestnut hair that caught the light in auburn glints and eyes the color of spring leaves. Her cheeks held a natural rose flush, and her smile was open and genuine, contrasting sharply with the carefully controlled reserve of Elena's aristocratic elegance. Eleanor offered her hand, her touch cool and reassuring. "Welcome to Heatherwood Hall," she said, her voice soft yet confident. "I've heard much about you from Gabriel," she nodded to her brother, "and I am glad you have come." Days of gentle companionship. Over the next several weeks, Eleanor and I spent many hours in leisurely companionship. She showed me the hidden paths through the gardens, introducing me to the shy primroses beneath the hedgerows and the ancient sundial at the heart of the herbaceous borders. She had a natural gift for gardening and taught me the difference between composting turnings and the delicate art of rose grafting. In her presence, even menial tasks, a morning cup of tea in the rose garden, collecting fresh eggs from the hen house, felt imbued with quiet delight. Eleanor's conversation differed from Elena's intense intellectual debates. She loved simple stories of village life and local folklore, the tale of the old shepherd who heard music in the moors, the legend of the fox spirit that guarded the ancient oak grove. Listening to her, I found my mind unclenching for the first time, allowing small marvels back into my world. Renewed purpose. One afternoon, while we walked beside a shimmering lily pond, Eleanor gently asked, "James, what do you hope to find here?" I paused, staring at the water's surface. "I hope to escape my grief," I admitted. "But now, I think I seek something more, a reason to live again." She nodded thoughtfully. "Grief changes us, but it need not define us forever. You have known great love, James. Perhaps you are destined to love anew, not in her place, but alongside her memory." Her words struck me with their tenderness and wisdom, and for the first time I truly felt she understood the complexity of my heart. An offer of marriage. As spring deepened into early summer, Eleanor and I grew closer. Our companionship blossomed into affection, gentle, patient, respectful of the wounds we both carried. One warm evening, under a canopy of wisteria in full bloom, she slipped her hand into mine. "Will you stay here, James?" she asked quietly. "Make this place your home once more?" My heart pounded in my chest. I realized then that I had found in Eleanor not a replacement for Elena, but a new partner in life, someone whose spirit complemented mine and whose compassion soothed my lingering pain. That autumn, beneath skies streaked with gold and crimson, we were married in the small chapel at the heart of Heatherwood's grounds. The service was intimate. Lord Sinclair officiated, the local vicar offered a blessing, and a handful of close friends, village neighbors, gardeners, and a few dear colleagues gathered to celebrate. As Eleanor stood before me in a simple ivory gown, her face illuminated by candlelight, I felt tears not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude. I whispered to myself, "This is a new beginning." Settling in the tower room. For our honeymoon, Eleanor and I moved into a lofty chamber in one of Heatherwood Hall's oldest towers. The room was spacious and light-filled, with a wide mullioned window overlooking the rolling hills. The ceiling arched high like the hull of an upturned ship, and traces of ancient murals remained on the plastered walls. A crystal chandelier hung in the center, its prisms casting rainbows across the patterned rug below. Eleanor's touch was evident everywhere. Embroidered cushions on the window seat, fresh flowers on the oak writing desk, and soft linens on the bed. Though the tower room retained echoes of its centuries-old history, it felt warm and welcoming. An ideal sanctuary for two souls forging a new life together. Hope amid uncertainty. In the weeks that followed our marriage, I encountered moments of guilt and fear, hesitant pangs that loving again somehow betrayed Elena's memory. Yet Eleanor never pressured me. Instead, she allowed me the space to grieve and to heal at my own pace. She encouraged me to speak of Elena openly, to keep her memory alive without allowing it to overshadow the present. Slowly, I discovered that love could be layered without being divided, that my devotion to Elena and my affection for Eleanor could coexist in different chambers of my heart. As I taught Eleanor some of the Latin passages Elena once loved, and as she taught me to identify wildflowers in the meadows, we built a tapestry of shared experiences that honored the past while embracing the future. A fresh dawn. One clear morning, as dawn's light poured into our tower room, I awoke to Eleanor's soft singing of a gentle folk melody. I watched her, silhouetted against the pale sky, her auburn hair framing her serene face. In that moment, I felt the final weight of my sorrow lift. The door to my heart, once closed and heavy, stood ajar, ready to welcome life's richness in all its complexity. Thus, Chapter 6 concludes on a hopeful note. A man reborn through companionship, learning anew to find joy in simple moments, and building a future honored by love's enduring capacity to heal. In Eleanor's gentle strength, I discovered not only a new beginning, but a promise that even the deepest wounds can give rise to a brighter, more vibrant life. Chapter 7. Unseen Disturbances. It began on a night so still that the only sound in Heatherwood Hall was the steady ticking of the grandfather clock at the end of the long corridor. Eleanor and I had retired early, eager to settle into the comfortable routine we had cultivated in our tower room. The heavy draperies were drawn against the chill, and the fire in the tall stone hearth crackled softly. Outside, the wind had died down, and the great oaks in the garden stood motionless under a pallid moon. I was reading by lamplight when I first heard it, a faint scraping, like the whisper of a shoe against old wood. I paused mid-sentence and turned my head toward the far corner of the room. The sound came again, a slight, irregular rasp. Yet when I looked, the carpet lay perfectly flat, the antique chair against the wall unmoved. I smiled at myself, attributing it to my imagination, brought on by the castle's creaking timbers and my own overactive mind. Eleanor lay beside me beneath the soft quilt, her auburn hair spread across the pillow like autumn leaves. She stirred, and I bent over to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. "All is well," I murmured. "Just the house settling." She murmured something in reply, drifting back toward sleep. I returned to my book, but my nerves remained taut. Every time the wind sighed against the stone walls, I flinched, expecting to hear that rasp again. Minutes, or was it hours? Later, I was awakened by a soft murmur at the foot of the bed. I sat upright, heart pounding, and listened. It sounded like muted footsteps, too light to belong to a servant, moving across the carpet toward the armoire. I nudged Eleanor's shoulder gently. "Eleanor," I whispered, "did you hear that?" She cracked one eye open sleepily. "Hear what, my love?" I pointed toward the dark corner by the armoire. "Footsteps, or something." She sat up, wrapping the quilt around her slender shoulders. "There's no one there," she said, brushing her hair back from her face. Yet her voice carried a tension I had never heard before. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and peered into the shadows. "It must be the wind," she insisted softly, though her fingers trembled around the edge of the quilt. Together, we stood and crossed to the armoire. I pressed my hand against the polished wood and felt nothing unusual. The footsteps had ceased, and the room was eerily still. I took Eleanor's hand and guided her back to the bed. "Sleep," I said, smoothing her hair. "I will stay by your side." She nodded, but I sensed her unease. As she closed her eyes, I felt a chill descend upon us, as though the warmth of the hearth had been extinguished. I remained awake long after Eleanor slipped into a troubled sleep. Over the next few nights, the disturbances grew more pronounced. First came the soft thuds, as though something heavy was dropped somewhere beyond the closed door. Then came the whispering, a susurrus like hushed voices speaking too low for comprehension. I would sit in the empty corridor, lantern in hand, following the sounds until they faded into the tapestried walls. Eleanor pleaded with me to dismiss it all as the whims of age-old stone and settling foundations. I wanted to believe her. Yet one evening, I witnessed something I could not rationalize. I returned to our tower room after dinner and found a small marble statuette, one I had placed on the writing desk that afternoon, lying shattered on the floor. Its porcelain pieces were scattered across the faded rug, as if a great weight had fallen from above. I knew I had set it carefully in place before leaving. No draft could have done this, for the single window was closed tight. Eleanor gasped when she saw the fragments. "James, what happened?" I knelt and gathered the pieces in trembling hands. "I don't know," I said, offering her a helpless glance. "But this cannot be mere chance." That night, neither of us slept. We sat by the hearth, listening to the house breathe, to the sighs deep within its bones. When dawn broke, pale and reluctant, I resolved to confront whatever force haunted our home. A week later, the most unsettling occurrence unfolded. I was seated at the desk, penning a letter to Lord Sinclair, when I felt a sudden shift in the air, a slight current that caressed the back of my neck. I looked up and saw, to my righteous astonishment, the heavy velvet tapestry that hung on the north wall rising, billowing inward as though caught by an invisible hand. The folds fluttered like dark wings, exposing the cold stone behind. I leapt from my chair and reached out to grasp the fabric, but it snapped back into place so swiftly that I nearly stumbled. My heart thundered as I stared at the tapestry, now unmoved and serene. Footsteps sounded behind me, Eleanor's quick and fragile. She hurried to my side, eyes wide. "James, what did you see?" she whispered, clutching my sleeve. "The tapestry. It moved on its own," I said hoarsely, my voice barely above a breath. "There is something here with us." Eleanor drew in a shuddering breath. "I can no longer dismiss this," she said softly, her lovely face drained of color. "Whatever it is, it fears the light. See how it strikes only when shadows fall." That night, determined to protect us, I sealed the windows, lit every candle, and placed a sprig of rosemary, an herb said to ward off malevolent spirits, around the room. I sat vigil, leaning against Eleanor's shoulder as she slept fitfully. Should any disturbance arise, I vowed to confront it head-on, and yet, when the rasping began again, the soft scraping at the threshold, we were ready. I rose, clutching a bronze lantern in one hand and a length of stout chain in the other. Eleanor followed, her breathing shallow but steady. Together, we crept toward the door, every sense straining. But the corridor lay silent, the walls still, the floorboards calm. No footsteps, no whispering, no stir of tapestry. The only witness to our dread was the fading glow of the lantern, dancing on the cold stone. We returned to the tower room, exhausted but resolute. Whatever haunted Heatherwood Hall, it had no intention of revealing itself fully. It prowled at the edges of perception, an unseen force that toyed with us, testing our courage and our bond. As Chapter 7 draws to a close, we find ourselves entwined in a delicate balance of fear and defiance. Eleanor sleeps at last, her soft breathing a fragile reminder of all we stand to lose. I sit by the flickering hearth, lantern at my feet, chain laid across the table like a silent promise. I will protect her, no matter the cost. Outside, the wind stirs, ruffling the great oaks and whispering through the ancient ivy. And in that whisper, I sense both warning and challenge, as though the house itself dares us to uncover the truth of its restless heart. Chapter 8: Shadows of the Past. Late one autumn afternoon, as the low sun draped Heatherwood Hall in a wash of golden light, I found myself drawn once more into the castle's long corridors by an irresistible impulse. Despite the recent disturbances and Eleanor's growing unease, I felt compelled to explore the hidden corners of this ancient place, to confront whatever secrets it might hold. Perhaps, I thought, there lay an explanation for the restless energy that haunted our nights. The Forgotten. Wing. I slipped quietly from our tower chamber, leaving Eleanor engrossed in a book by the fireside. The corridor outside was lined with dusty portraits, whose stern visages seemed to turn as I passed, following me with painted eyes. At the far end lay a heavy iron-bound door I had never opened, the entrance to the manor's abandoned eastern wing. Heart pounding, I pushed the door wide. It groaned on rusted hinges, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. The air that drifted up was chill and stale, carrying the faint scent of mold and age. I lit a lantern, holding it aloft, and began my descent, each step echoing in the silent shaft, whispers in stone. At the base of the stairs lay a long passage lit here and there by small wall sconces, their candles long since burned away. The floor was strewn with detritus, crumbling plaster, splintered wood, and handfuls of rotted leaves tracked in from above. As I walked, I felt the weight of centuries pressing in around me, as if the hall itself remembered every footstep that had passed through. Halfway down the corridor, I paused before a boarded-up alcove. The planks covering it were cracked and water-stained. On one splintered edge, I noticed a fresh scratch, as though something or someone had tried to claw its way out. I pressed my lantern against the boards and heard a low, rasping whisper from within, too faint to understand but unmistakably human. A chill seized my spine. I placed my hand on the wood, and the whisper rose into a keening wail that shook the walls. I staggered back, my lantern flickering, and the sound ceased as suddenly as it had begun. Gathering my courage, I pried a loose board free. Beyond, the alcove opened into a small, dust-choked chamber, echoes of sorrow. Inside the chamber lay relics of a bygone era, broken doll fragments, tarnished silver trinket boxes, and a faded letter sealed with crimson wax. I picked up the letter, my fingers trembling as I broke the seal. The parchment crackled as I unfolded, it revealing a hurried, elegant script. My dearest Alistair, I fear the shadows grow stronger each night. The walls themselves whisper of tragedy here, of love betrayed and lives cut short. If you read this, know that I am trapped, and the darkness will not release me. Forgive my silence. I pray you will come for me, though I know it may already be too late. Isabella. My heart tightened at the name. Isabella. I recalled a local legend Lord Sinclair had once mentioned. A young bride, centuries ago, who died mysteriously on her wedding night in this very castle. Her spirit, they said, wandered the halls, longing for the husband she never truly left. The letter must be hers, proof that her sorrow had been penned in her own hand, unveiling the past. Determined to learn more, I searched the chamber and found, beneath a loose floorboard, a rusted iron key. It bore a simple engraving, the Sinclair family crest, a winding hawthorn branch. Clutching the key, I rose and retraced my steps back to the staircase, lantern held high, mind racing with possibilities. What door did this key open, and would it bring me closer to understanding the restless force in our home? The locked study. At the top of the stairs, I recalled a locked door in the library that Lord Sinclair had once shown me. A small, private study reserved for his ancestors. I hurried through the corridors, the key clutched in my hand, and located the door behind a tall bookcase. The iron lock resisted at first, then clicked open with a reluctant turn. Inside, the study was more intact than the forgotten wing. Shelves of leather-bound volumes, a large oak desk, and a high-backed chair. Yet even here, dust lay thick, and the air smelled of old paper and secrets. On the desk lay a mourning portrait, a woman in a white bridal gown, her eyes haunted, her smile tinged with fear. Beneath the portrait, I found an open journal. Its entries chronicled the bride's final days. October 12th. Alistair is distant. He spends his nights in the tower, speaking to the walls. I sense something in his eyes, a secret he conceals from me. October 15th. Strange noises echo through the halls. I thought I heard Alistair calling my name in the darkness. October 18th. Today I discovered footprints in my chamber, wet, muddy, as though someone walked through rain and then crept close to my bed. My heart trembles at every shadow. October 20th. Tonight I donned my wedding veil for our first dance. Under the great chandelier, I felt a sudden cold and heard a whispered promise of love. When I turned, no one was there. October 22nd. Alistair wept by my side as I lay feverish. He swore he would not leave me. Yet when I awoke, I found him gone, and this journal open before me. The candle has burned low. I fear morning will not find me alive. As I read the final untimely entry, the silence settled thick around me. Isabella's plight had been one of love entwined with terror, a terror that seemed to linger still within these walls, a presence felt. I closed the journal with reverent care and turned toward the door, my lantern's flame flickering. The air grew suddenly cold, and I sensed a presence behind me. I did not dare look, but I felt her sorrow pressing in, a heartbroken lament that echoed Isabella's words. My breath caught, and I gripped the journal to my chest, vowing to bring peace to her restless spirit. With trembling legs, I left the study and made my way back to the tower room. The corridors felt less oppressive now that I understood the source of their lament. A bride's broken heart, bound to these halls for centuries. Yet knowledge alone would not quell the disturbances. I realized that to lay Isabella's spirit to rest, I would need to confront the grief that had once torn her world apart. A plan to heal. Back in our chamber, I shared Isabella's story with Eleanor as she listened, pale and silent. Together we resolved to perform a small rite of remembrance, to place her wedding veil, carefully preserved in the locked study's armoire, upon her portrait, and to leave a bouquet of white lilies, symbols of purity and renewal, on the desk. Then we would speak words of compassion, acknowledging her pain and offering her freedom from centuries of sorrow. That night, under a clear, star-studded sky, we returned to the study, lanterns in hand. The veil lay folded in its silk wrapping, and the lilies glowed softly in the moonlight. As we arranged them and spoke our benediction, a gentle breeze stirred the candles, and the room seemed to exhale around us, an almost imperceptible sigh of relief. For the first time, I felt the oppressive weight of the past lift, as though Isabella's spirit had finally found a path beyond these walls. As Chapter 8 closes, Heatherwood Hall stands hushed, its ancient stones resting from their centuries of lament. Yet I know that our journey is far from over. The shadows of the past have been unveiled, but the healing of old wounds and the quieting of restless spirits will require vigilance and compassion. Eleanor and I, hand in hand, left the study that night with hearts both heavy and hopeful, knowing that love, in life or in death, holds the power to transcend even the darkest of mysteries. Chapter 9: Life and Death. For weeks after the ritual in Isabella's study, the air in Heatherwood Hall felt lighter, as though centuries of sorrow had been gently lifted. Eleanor and I believed we had laid the restless spirit to rest, and for a time, peace reigned. Yet beneath the surface of that calm, a darker current was gathering strength, one that would test our courage and bind our lives to the very mysteries we sought to resolve. A sudden ailment. It began the morning after our return from the study. Eleanor awoke with a pale complexion and a feeble smile. "Just a chill," she said, closing her eyes against a headache that throbbed behind her temples. I insisted on tea and porridge in bed, and she accepted both with a grace that belied how unwell she truly was. By midday, her fever had crept upward. I summoned Dr. Cassidy, the local physician, who arrived in a flurry of concern. He examined Eleanor's pulse, noted the slight flushing of her cheeks, and listened to her chest through a stethoscope. After a thoughtful pause, he pronounced it a grave fever, one he could not immediately explain. "Rest and cool compresses," he advised, scribbling a prescription and instructing the nurse to administer gentle tonics. "I will return tomorrow and adjust treatment as needed." As he left, I watched Eleanor's golden brown eyes dim with fatigue. I sat by her bedside, holding her hand, willing her strength to return. But that night, as I checked on her once more, I found her breathing shallow, her skin slick with perspiration, her slender frame trembling beneath the covers. The first night vigil. I stoked the fire in her chamber, placed cool towels on her forehead, and whispered reassurances as she drifted between fevered dreams. Outside her door, the hall lay silent, but within those walls I imagined the faint echo of Isabella's lament returning, an undercurrent of grief that had not fully departed. Every time Eleanor exhaled, I half expected to hear a rasp of unseen footsteps or the rustle of a tapestry moved by invisible hands. Yet the only sounds were Eleanor's labored breaths and the steady crackle of the hearth. When dawn crept through the curtains, I found her eyes fluttering open, confusion in their depths. "James," she murmured, "did I dream of Isabella?" "Again?" I pressed a comforting kiss to her forehead. "You are safe, my love. Rest now." She closed her eyes and seemed to sleep more peacefully, but I knew the struggle was only beginning. Waning strength. Over the next several days, Eleanor's condition alternated between moments of clarity and alarming decline. One afternoon, she lifted her head and asked me, "Do you remember the wisteria in the tower garden, James?" Her voice was faint, almost ethereal. "Yes," I replied, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "I remember how the vines spill over the stone, heavy with blooms." She smiled, a fragile curve of her lips, and closed her eyes again. Yet that night, her fever returned with a vengeance. I found her unconscious by candlelight, her hand limp in mine, her pulse weak. Dr. Cassidy arrived in haste, but his remedies seemed powerless against the mysterious sickness. "It is as though some dark presence has invaded her," he confessed, in a low voice. "I will call for more experienced help, but the journey may prove too much for her weakened state." The edge of death. On the eve of the third night, Eleanor's chamber assumed the stillness of a tomb. I sat beside her bed, clutching her hand, my heart a storm of dread. The flickering candles cast tall, quivering shadows that danced on the hall walls, shadows I could no longer dismiss as mere tricks of light. Each silhouette seemed to reach for her, as though drawn by her fading life. I bent close to her ear. "Stay with me, Eleanor. I am here." But her breathing had slowed until it was scarcely perceptible. I pressed my ear to her chest, straining for the faintest heartbeat. Minutes passed like hours until I dared to whisper, "No, not yet." In the depths of that long vigil, I recalled Elena's own valiant struggle and her final words, "Promise me you will not grieve too deeply." I had vowed then to carry her memory forward, and now I faced the prospect of losing Eleanor as well. The thought was unbearable, a brush with loss. In the small hours before dawn, Eleanor's breath ceased altogether. Panic surged through me. "Eleanor!" I cried, shaking her gently. "Please, breathe!" Her body lay still, cold against the white sheets. I felt tears sting my eyes as I appealed to some unseen force. If Isabella's spirit found release, then let Eleanor find life. Desperate, I sprinkled water from the font at Isabella's resting place upon her lips, praying the ancient blessing would awaken her. There was no immediate response. The candle flames flickered, guttered, and then steadied. In the hush, I leaned over her, my grief raw and achingly present. "I could not endure this loss," I whispered. "I cannot lose you too." The return of light. As the first pale light of dawn filtered through the curtains, I heard a faint stirring, a soft, almost hesitant exhalation. Eleanor's chest heaved once, twice, and then a tremor ran through her fingers as they curled around mine. I felt a rush of hope flood my veins. "She lives," I gasped, pressing my cheek to her cooling skin. Her eyes fluttered open, golden green, weary but alive. For a long moment she gazed up at me in wonder. "James?" she whispered, her voice a wispy thread of sound. I could not speak, only weep with relief as I cradled her head. She attempted a weak smile. "Do you think it was Isabella who saved me?" she asked, a tremor of disbelief in her tone. I brushed damp hair from her forehead. "I believe the spirit of this house, released from centuries of anguish, left behind a blessing of life." Fragile recovery. In the days that followed, Eleanor's strength returned slowly. The fever finally broke, and color crept back into her cheeks. Dr. Cassidy declared her convalescence miraculous and enigmatic beyond his medical understanding. I took charge of her care, feeding her nourishing broths and sitting by her side, through long afternoons of gentle reading. Yet even as she recovered, a subtle change marked Eleanor's gaze. A deepened awareness, a tenderness that seemed drawn from the well of her brush with death. When she spoke of the future, her voice carried a gentle clarity. "We must honor those who came before us, not only in memory, but in the life we live." Together, we visited Isabella's old chamber one final time. We laid fresh lilies upon her portrait and thanked her for the gift of Eleanor's life. As we spoke our farewells, a soft breeze stirred the candles, and the room felt suffused with a warm, reassuring presence. The balance of life. Chapter 9 closes on a note of hard-won triumph and solemn reflection. Life and death, intertwined in a dance as old as time, had visited us both. I learned that the forces which haunt old walls can be both destructive and redemptive, and that love, in its purest form, holds power to bridge the divide between mortality and the mysterious beyond. As Eleanor and I stand together in the morning, light, her hand resting gently on mine, we know that our bond has been tempered in shadow and flame. Whatever unseen currents still flow through Heatherwood Hall, we will meet them side by side, our hearts guided by the fragile, unbreakable promise of life. Chapter 10 Return of the Lost. In the weeks after Eleanor's miraculous recovery, Heatherwood Hall settled into a fragile peace. The candles burned steadily, the tapestries no longer rustled with unseen hands, and the corridors resonated with our laughter and quiet conversations once more. Yet, as autumn slipped into winter, I sensed a shift in the very air, a ripple in the fabric of our restored tranquility, as though something long buried was stirring awake. A chilling discovery. One evening, drawn by an unnameable impulse, I returned, alone, to the ancient eastern wing where I had first unearthed Isabella's tragedy. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light spilling through narrow windows and casting elongated shadows across the dusty floor. I carried only a single lantern, its glow trembling against the encroaching darkness. As I passed the boarded-up alcove, a soft voice halted me in my tracks. It was Eleanor's voice, her gentle tone calling my name. My heart leapt. I dropped the lantern and rushed forward, but the corridor was empty. Only the brittle boards sealed off the alcove and the distant echo of my own footsteps. I relit the lantern more steadily, and there, on the scraggly moss at the base of the wall, lay a single white rose. Fresh, pristine, impossibly vibrant amid the decay. I recognized it at once. Eleanor's favored bloom. My breath caught. How could a fresh flower have appeared in this abandoned wing? A whisper in the halls. Carrying the rose, I retraced my steps toward our tower room, lantern held high. The hall seemed to breathe around me. Each candle flame flicker cast dancing figures along the walls. I reached the staircase landing and heard faintly the rustle of silk. I followed the sound up the spiraling steps, breath shallow, senses taut. At the top, I found the wide corridor leading to our chamber. The rose's petals brushed the floor as though laid down on purpose. I knelt to retrieve it, and there, ahead of me, stood a figure in the doorway. Eleanor, framed by the soft lamplight, her auburn hair glimmering like copper in the glow. "James?" she asked softly, concern in her eyes. "I heard footsteps, and thought you might—" I leapt to my feet, rose trembling in my hand. "Eleanor, where did this come from?" I asked, voice cracking. She frowned, glancing at the rose. "I received no rose," she said, "and I did not call for you." The unveiling. We stood in silence, the lantern between us, the rose cradled as though it were a fragile secret. Then, behind Eleanor, the tapestry on the walls stirred, as though breathed upon by an unseen breath. The heavy folds shuddered, revealing a hidden niche carved into the stone. My heart hammered as I stepped forward and peered inside. There lay a small wooden box, bound in iron and inscribed with swirling runes I did not recognize. The lid was ajar. I lifted the box gently, revealing, beneath a layer of velvet, a delicate wedding veil shimmering with a pearlescent glow. This was no ordinary relic. This was the veil Eleanor and I had placed in Isabella's study months ago. I closed the box and held it against my chest as the realization struck. Someone, or something, had retrieved it from Isabella's portrait chamber and returned it here, to this long-forgotten wing. But what force could traverse locked doors and sealed alcoves? And why bring back that symbol of love and loss? An echo from the past. As we stood there, the cold air seemed to pulse. A soft sigh drifted through the corridor, and the lantern's flame dimmed. Eleanor gripped my arm, her face pale but resolute. "Whatever this is," she whispered, "it connects Isabella and us, and perhaps Elena too." Her words sent a chill through me. I recalled the first time we had felt Elena's presence, the way her memory haunted the old town by the Danube. Could it be that in laying Isabella's spirit to rest, we had reopened a door to something deeper, something entwined with Elena's own departure, the veil's revelation? Guided by a mixture of dread and duty, I carried the box and the rose back to the locked study. Eleanor followed, her steps steady even as her eyes flickered with fear. Inside, the portrait of Isabella glowed under the moonlight filtering through the dusty window panes. I set the box on the oak desk and placed the rose atop the portrait's frame. Then, with trembling fingers, I opened the box and lifted the veil. The fabric fell like liquid moonlight, and the air in the room grew still, as though holding its breath. Suddenly, a wind rose, a sudden, impossible gust that swept through the closed room. Candles guttered, the lantern on the desk wavered, and the portrait's surface rippled as though viewed through water. Then, in the reflection, I saw not Isabella's painted figure, but another woman entirely. Elena, her dark hair framing a face of serene determination, her obsidian eyes shining with recognition. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. Eleanor gasped and reached for my hand. The room felt suspended between past and present, life and death entwined in the flickering shadows. Elena's return. In that trembling moment, the veil slipped from my grasp and drifted toward the portrait. The painted figure of Isabella blurred and shifted, revealing Elena stepping forward from within the frame. She looked as she had on that first rainy evening by the Danube, tall, slender, clothed in a midnight blue gown that moved with silent grace. "Elena?" My voice was a strangled whisper, disbelief and awe mingling in my chest. She smiled, a sad, beautiful curve of her lips. "I have come at last," she said, her voice echoing as though both far away and immediately beside me. "I have followed the threads of love and loss, guided by your devotion." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "But how? Why?" She raised a slender hand, and the lantern on my desk flared to life, illuminating the room in warm light. "Love transcends the boundaries of life and death," she said softly. "Through Isabella's sorrow and your courage, you have woven a path for me to return." Eleanor stood at my side, her expression gentle but resolute. She stepped forward, offering Elena a bouquet of lilies. "Your story deserves peace," she said. "And yet, I see in your eyes the longing that would not let you rest. Reunion and release." Elena took the lilies and breathed in their fragrance, her obsidian eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, turning to me, she placed a white-gloved hand on my shoulder. "Remember me not with sorrow, but with the warmth of our shared moments. Let this place be a home for love, not for grief." As her words settled over us, the room seemed to exhale its last breath of haunting energy. The portrait of Isabella shimmered, then settled back into its painted form, while Elena's figure grew more translucent, as though the lantern's glow were drawing her spirit back to the realm beyond. I reached out, brushing a strand of her black hair from her face. "Will I see you again?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. She smiled, a beacon of serene hope. "In every gentle breeze, in every silent corner where love persists," she promised. Then, with a final nod, her form dissolved into a cascade of moonlight, drifting upward and through the window's narrow panes, vanishing into the night sky, a new dawn. Eleanor and I stood in the hush that followed, the candles glowing steadily once more. The veil lay folded in the open box, the rose wilted but still white upon the portrait frame. We closed the box together, sealing it with reverent care, and replaced it in its hidden niche behind the tapestry. As we ascended the stairs toward our tower room, the first light of dawn brushed the horizon with pale pink. Heatherwood Hall seemed to breathe anew, its ancient stones warmed by the promise of peace. And though Elena's physical presence had faded, I felt her spirit woven into the very heart of the house, a gentle guardian born of love's enduring power. In the days that followed, visitors remarked on the newfound serenity of Heatherwood Hall, the way laughter echoed once more in the corridors, the way the gardens bloomed even as winter approached. And each morning, as Eleanor and I walked, hand in hand beneath the emerging sun, I carried in my heart the knowledge that love, once lost, could indeed return, transformed, luminous, eternal. Great work today! Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.